Why are religious historians and Trinitarian theologians, why are they so quiet about the 2nd century? When teaching their Trinitarian history, most scholars will go from the 1st century and jump into the 3rd and 4th century, mainly the 4th century, the Council of Nicaea 325. And this is how they teach their history. But why is this so? Why are Trinitarians, why are scholars, why are theologians so quiet about the 2nd century? Well, follow me for a few minutes and I'll tell you why. In the 2nd century, the Roman Empire was still in control. And they had 3 main provinces. It was Rome, it was Alexandria, and Antioch. Those were the 3 principal places of Rome. And there's a lot to talk about these, but I'm going to focus on the province of Alexandria just to let you know how things were happening in the 2nd century. Important things that we need to know so that we can understand the historical development of the Trinity doctrine. Alexandria was known as the seat of philosophy, and for the longest time it had the largest library in the entire world. So Alexandria was known for its knowledge and its exploring into other avenues of knowledge. So this was Alexandria. It was a powerful place to seek gnosis or information, to seek knowledge. What many people are not saying is that in the 2nd century, from Alexandria and a couple other places, but mainly from Alexandria, a lot of books were written. There were false books in the names of the apostles. There were forgeries. And for some reason, a lot of books came out from Alexandria so that people could mistake them for the books of the Bible, especially the New Testament. These books came out in bundles, and people didn't know whether they were reading the writings of the apostles or forgeries. All of this came in the 2nd century and 3rd century from Alexandria and other places, yes, but mainly from Alexandria. And as I mentioned before, it was a seat of philosophy. And one of the greatest philosophers of the 1st century happened to be Philo of Alexandria. He was the most well-known philosopher of his time. So in the 2nd century, his ideas were circulating throughout the communities. And several things came from the eclectic philosophy of Philo of Alexandria and the eclectic philosophies that were found in Alexandria. Let's get into that. From Alexandria, we find the first notions or the beginning of the Kabbalah, because there was Jews that had come from Babylon that came to live in Alexandria. And so mysticism and the occult teachings of the Kabbalah were in that place. And what Trinitarians don't want to tell you is that the 2nd century was filled with the teaching of a Trinity, a pagan Trinity. For the Kabbalah has as its God a Trinity. And their Trinity was known as the Keter, the Bina, and the Chokmah, which was God, understanding, and wisdom. Also, from Alexandria, we have the beginnings of Gnosticism. This is where the first Gnostics were seen. And what historians don't tell you is that these Gnostics were inside the church. There was a lot of people who were trying to mix it up with the Christians, but they brought in their own ideas and philosophies, traditions. And the Gnostics, they were not an exception. They came into the churches also trying to mix it up, to the point that Valentinus, one of the greatest Gnostics that lived during that time, he was in the church, and he almost was voted in as a pope of Rome. But he missed it by a couple of votes. And you can find this in the writings of Tertullian, how Valentinus was almost a pope of Rome. And he was one of the greatest Gnostics. So Gnosticism was mixed up stuff that came into the churches, the communities. And the Gnostics also developed a Trinity. The Trinity was like the Kabbalah, but now they made it a little bit more clear that it was the Father, the Mother, and the Son. And then we have the church fathers that came in the 2nd century. I'm talking about Clement of Rome, Ignatius, Polycarp, Theophilus, Irenaeus, Justin, and down the line. These men came in the 2nd century, the church fathers. And since they had been philosophers, now claiming to be Christian, but they had a background in philosophy, they identified with Philo of Alexandria, they identified with Alexandria, they identified with the school that developed in Alexandria, who was represented by Clement of Alexandria and Origen. These men were philosophers also, and they took their ideas from the Gnostics. And the beginning of the Trinity for these men was God, His Word, and wisdom. The same as the Kabbalah, the same as the Gnostics. What do you mean by that? Well, the church fathers, the formula was God, Word, and wisdom. God, Word would be Bina, and wisdom will be Chokmah. Or in the Gnostics, it will be the Father, the Son would be the Word, and wisdom would be Sophia, the Mother. All of this came in the 2nd century. It all was trying to come into the gospel, but thank God that in the writings of the church fathers, they themselves reveal what was happening. They revealed that the majority of people were not in agreement with this pagan trinity that was coming into the church. And they labeled the church fathers, including Tertullian, Hippolytus, and all these people, they labeled them as preachers of 2 gods and 3 gods. At no time did the early church of the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, at no time did they give in to this teaching of a pagan trinity that the church fathers wanted everyone to receive as being the Trinity of God. This is what happened in the 2nd century. All these trinities were coming about, and men were pushing this Trinity doctrine because they were philosophers, they were Gnostics, and they were Kabbalists. This is the truth. And the Trinitarians or historians that protect the Trinity don't want you to know that the 2nd century was full with deception. A lot of deception came in the 2nd century. And this is the background of where the Trinity came from. And I pray that you will study this on your own and find out if what I'm saying is true. It is there. I would not dare to make a video and all other videos that I've made, not knowing that I can defend it with historical proof and biblical proof. This is the truth of what happened. The 2nd century was so full of deception and trinities coming from all sides, and the school of Alexandria was number 1 in promoting the Trinity by Clement of Alexandria and Origen, among many. You know that Athanasius was from Alexandria. And all of this stuff, if you study, you will connect all the dots and find out that the Trinity is pagan all the way. It never was Christian, but it was made to seem like it's a biblical doctrine. Now, the last thing I want to say is there's a lot of university professors in the area of theology who are teaching everything but what really happened in the 2nd century. And I could give you all the names of all these professors. Doesn't matter what university. It doesn't matter what college. When it comes to theology, they are hiding the truth of what happened in the 2nd century. I say hiding, I'm being polite, because if they're not hiding it, then they're deceiving their students. And the other thing we can say, either they were very ignorant in their history. You decide which one it is. But the university professors should be held accountable for all these years and years of teaching on the history of the Trinity and not really telling you the truth of what really happened in the 2nd century.